Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In this video, there's going to be 44 practice test questions involving solving equations, which is a topic that frequently appears in the mathematics knowledge subtest of both the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, that is the ASVAB, as well as the pre-screening Internet Delivered Computer Adaptive Test, that is the PiCAT. More specifically, you should expect to see at least 2 to 5 questions from this topic on both the ASVAB and PiCAT. In addition, I want to mention that on the actual ASVAB and PiCAT, you're not permitted to use a calculator or a reference sheet. So as you work your way through these 44 practice test questions involving solving equations, try not to use any of those resources. Of course, in order to get the most from this video, you'll want to pause the video after I read a question, attempt to solve the question on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. Finally, and most importantly, I quickly want to mention this. Please stop paying for tutoring or access to online boot camps. The reality is 95% or more of you are more than capable of passing this very simple test on your own, as long as you spend a few days to months studying for it. Unfortunately, having evaluated many of the other tutoring groups recently, I've come to the conclusion that they've just gone through my free content and copied it, and I'll leave it at that. Instead of paying for any resources whatsoever, here's what you can do. If you need to review the core concepts that show up on the ASVAB and PiCAT, go to the playlist section of my channel, and there you'll find my reviews for all of those concepts. If you just want to take practice tests, find my playlist called Math Bootcamp Playlist. It has more than 500 practice test questions, and as you can see, it's been viewed more than 110,000 times. Finally, I have a collection of more than 500 shorts videos. Generally speaking, those are easier practice test questions that focus on building up your mental math abilities. So with all that finally being said, let's go ahead and get started with this video. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 4 times x plus 6 in parentheses equals 48, then x equals. So we're going to be solving the equation 4 times x plus 6 equals 48 for x. That is, we're going to get x equal to something by itself. To get started, we can divide both sides of this equation by 4, of course. In doing so, this crosses out here, leaving us with x plus 6 on this side. What is 48 divided by 4? Well, if you didn't know that was 12, you can actually say this. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. All right, so to get x by itself, now we're just going to subtract 6 from both sides. This says x equals 12 minus 6, which is positive 6. So this one is A6. You do have to be able to solve equations for this test. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 4 to the x power equals 64, then x equals. So I'm going to start by copying this one down as if I was working on my own scratch paper. And then I'm just going to plug in each of the answer choices for x and see which of them makes a true statement. Let's start with 2. 4 squared is the same thing as 4 times 4, which is 16. This does not equal 64. Let's do 4 to the third. That's 4 multiplied by itself 3 times. Well, we know 4 times 4 is 16. What is 16 times 4? Again, if you can't do that mentally, do it off to the side. 6 times 4 is 24. Carry a 2. 4 times 1 is 4 plus 2 is 6. So this is 64. In other words, 4 to the third power does in fact equal 64. So this one is B. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x over 5 plus 6 equals negative 14, then x equals. So we're going to be solving this equation for x. That said, let's get started by copying this one down as if we were writing on our own scratch paper like we will be on test day. Let's start by subtracting 6 from both sides in order to get x over 5 by itself. Negative 14 minus 6 is negative 20. Let's get rid of 5 from the denominator of x by multiplying this side by 5 and this side by 5. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. Negative 20 times 5 is going to be negative 100. So this one is A, negative 100. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 25 equals 4x minus 7, then x equals. So we're going to be solving this equation for x. In other words, we're going to get x equal to something by itself. Let's start by adding 7 to both sides of this equation. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with 4x over here. 25 plus 7 is 32, but you can use your fingers if you needed to there. Let's divide both sides by 4 now to get x by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with x over here. 32 divided by 4 is 8. If you want to write this the more common way, you could say x equals 8. That is the same thing. So this one is going to be B. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 4 over 3 times 3 over 4 equals 10r, then r equals. So we're trying to solve this equation for r. Let's go ahead and copy this down as if we were writing on scratch paper, which you will have on this test. Let's deal with these fractions right here. Um, we're multiplying fractions. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. 4 times 3, in other words, is 12. 3 times 4 is 12. So we have 12 over 12 equals 10r. What is 12 divided by 12? That is 1 equals 10r. To get r by itself, let's divide both sides by 10. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with r. r equals 1 over 10, but if you want to write this the more common way, you could say r equals 1/10. So this one is going to be D 1/10. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 3 times x plus 6 equals 39, then x equals. So we're going to be solving this equation for x. That said, let's go ahead and copy it down. On test day, you will have scratch paper and you will be writing down quite a few things. Let's start by distributing this 3 here and here. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 6 is 18 equals 39. Let's go ahead and get 3x by itself by subtracting 18 from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you a 3x over here. What is 39 minus 18? Well, 9 minus 8 is 1. 3 minus 1 is 2. So this becomes 3x equals 21. Divide both sides by 3 now to get x by itself. 21 divided by 3 is 7. So x in this case is B7. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if the square root of y plus the square root of 36 equals the square root of 100, what is y? So we're solving this equation for y. Let's get started by actually solving the square root of 36 and the square root of 100. The square root of 36, you should know it's 6. The square root of 100 is 10. Let's subtract 6 from both sides to get the square root of y by itself. 10 minus 6 is 4. To clear this square root on this y, we're going to do the opposite operation. That is, we're going to square it. The square root and square cross each other out, leaving you with just y on this side. 4 squared is 16, so this one's a 16. Let's plug in 16 for y to see if this makes sense. This becomes 4 plus 6 equals 10. Does 10 equal 10? It does, so we know our solution is correct. ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, we're going to be solving this equation for x. In other words, we're going to get x equal to something by itself. To start, we're going to distribute this 3 here and here. This becomes 3x minus 15 equals negative 33. Let's get 3x by itself by adding 15 to both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with 3x over here. If you can't do negative 33 plus 15 mentally, do it like this: 33 minus 15, but you know your result's going to be negative. 3 minus 5 we can't do. We have to borrow. This becomes 2. This becomes 13. 13 minus 5 is 8. 2 minus 1 is 1. So this is negative 18. Divide both sides by 3 now to get x by itself. Negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. So the answer to this one is negative 6. Let's check our work by plugging in negative 6 right here. Negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11. 3 times negative 11 is in fact negative 33, so we know this is the correct solution. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says solve the equation for x. We have negative x squared minus 5x squared plus 30 equals 0. Well, right away you should notice that negative x squared and negative 5x squared are like terms, so you can combine them. Negative x squared minus 5x squared is negative 6x squared plus 30 equals 0. We're solving for x, so move 30 to the other side via subtraction. This becomes negative 6x squared equals negative 30. Divide both sides by negative 6 to get x by itself. This becomes x squared equals a negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. Negative 30 divided by negative 6 is going to be positive 5. To get rid of this square on x, we take the square root of both sides. This crosses out. So our answer is going to be plus or minus the square root of 5, which is answer choice C. ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x squared minus 6 equals 30, then one possible value for x is. So we have x squared minus 6 equals 30. We're going to be solving this for x. In other words, we're going to get x equal to something by itself. First thing we're going to do is add 6 to both sides. In doing so, we're left with x squared over here and 36 over here. To get x by itself, we're now going to take the square root of both sides. In doing so, these cross out, leaving you with x on this side. And for our solution, the square root of 36 is going to result in plus or minus 6. That is to say both positive and negative 6 work as a solution. So the answer to this one is A. Let's let x be negative 6. This becomes negative 6 squared minus 6 equals 30. 36 minus 6 equals 30. 30 equals 30. This is a true statement. Therefore, I'm confident that negative 6 is correct. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x over 3 plus 9 equals negative 11, then x equals. In other words, we're going to be solving this equation for x, of course. And the first thing you want to do is subtract 9 from both sides so that we get x over 3 by itself. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with x over 3 over here equals negative 11 minus 9 is negative 20. Let's clear this 3 from the denominator over here by multiplying both sides by 3. In doing so, this crosses out here and here, leaving you with x over there. Negative 20 times positive 3, again, a negative times a positive is going to be a negative. It's going to be negative 60. So this one is B, negative 60. If you plug in negative 60 for x, negative 60 divided by 3 is going to be negative 20. Negative 20 plus 9 does in fact equal negative 11. So we do know that this is the correct solution to this one. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says solve for x. We have 3x equals 4 factorial. In case you didn't know what a factorial is, a factorial means you take the number that's given. So 5 factorial, we're given the number by 5. We multiply that number by every number that's less than that number until we get to 1. So 5 factorial, for example, is the same thing as 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So let's go ahead and solve this one. We have 3x equals 4 factorial. Again, 4 factorial is the same thing as 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Let's multiply this out. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 24 times 1 is 24. This says 3x equals 24. Divide both sides by 3 now to get x by itself. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So this one is C, 8. For this ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, we're going to be solving this equation for x. And for this one, we're going to do so via cross multiplication. That is, we're going to do 2 times 2x minus 4 equals 4 times 3x plus 2. We have to distribute this 2 here and here, and likewise this 4 here and here. This becomes 4x minus 8 equals 12x plus 8. Again, we're solving for x, so let's subtract 4x from both sides. In doing so, this crosses out. 12x minus 4x is going to be 8x. Let's subtract 8 from both sides, of course. This crosses out, leaving us with negative 8 minus 8, which is negative 16. Divide both sides by 8 now to get x by itself. This says x equals negative 16 divided by 8, which is negative 2. So this one is A, negative 2. For this ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, we're solving this equation for x. The square root of x plus the square root of 144 equals the square root of 169. For this test, I'd encourage you to memorize your perfect squares from 1 to at least 15, because if you did know those, you would know that the square root of 144 is 12. Likewise, you would know that the square root of 169 is 13. Again, we're solving this for x. In other words, we want to get x equal to something by itself. This becomes the square root of x equals 13 minus 12, which is 1. To get rid of this square root, we're going to square both sides. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. 1 squared is the same thing as 1 times 1, which is just 1. So the answer to this one is A1. If you want to check your work, plug in 1 for x. The square root of 1 is 1, plus 12 equals 13. Does 13 equal 13? It does. So therefore, we know A is correct. For this ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, we're going to be solving the equation for x. So we're going to do so via cross multiplication. That is, I'm going to do 2 times 2x minus 3. That's going to be equal to, again, we're going to do cross multiplication, 2 times 3x plus 1. Now we're just solving for x, but before we can do that, we have to distribute this 2 here and here, and this one here and here. This becomes 4x minus 6 equals 6x plus 2. Let's move this 4x over here via subtraction. This becomes 6x minus 4x, which is going to be 2x. Then let's move this 2 over here via subtraction. This crosses out. Negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8. Divide both sides by 2 now to get x by itself. This says x equals negative 8 divided by 2, which is going to be negative 4. So the answer to this one is B, negative 4. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if the square root of x plus the square root of 25 equals the square root of 64, what is x? So we're going to be solving this equation for x. That is, we're going to get x equal to something by itself. Let's go ahead and simplify this one very quickly. The square root of 25 is 5, and likewise, the square root of 64 is 8. Again, we're solving for x, so let's get everything that's not x to the other side of the equation. This says the square root of x equals 8 minus 5 or 3. To get rid of this square root, we're going to square both sides. These cancel out right here, leaving you at just x. 3 squared is 9. So the correct answer to this one is D9. Let's quickly check our work. This says the square root of 9, which is 3, plus 5 equals 8. Does 8 equal 8? It does. So we know this one is correct. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, we're trying to solve this equation for x. And if you look at it hard enough, you should realize that we can probably factor our numerator, and that's going to be x plus 3, x minus 4, of course, which means we can cross out these corresponding x minus 4s in our numerator and denominator. This becomes x plus 3 equals 7. Subtract 3 from both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with x equals 4. Now, for this one, you want to be very careful because if you plug in 4 for x into this original equation, you're going to get 0 over 0 equals 7. Does this equal 7? It is not a true statement. Therefore, for this one, there is no solution. ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x equals negative 6, what is the value of y in the following equation? So before we get started, I just want to point this out. We're going to be following the order of operations as we work this one out. That is to say, we're going to follow PEMDAS. We're going to do parentheses first, exponents, then multiplication and division as they appear from left to right. That is to say they're treated as equals, and then addition and subtraction as they appear from left to right. That is to say they're treated as equals. Let's plug in negative 6 for x squared. This is divided by 4 minus 2. Inside parentheses, we have two operations, exponents and division. We're going to do our exponent first. Negative 6 squared is the same thing as negative 6 times negative 6, which is going to be positive 36 divided by 4 minus 2. We're still working inside parentheses. 36 divided by 4 is 9. 9 minus 2 is 7. So this one is B. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 1/3 times 27 over 9 equals 3r, then r equals. So the first thing I want to do is take care of this multiplication of fractions for this problem. Notably, I want to multiply 1/3 and 27 over 9. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. So this becomes 1 times 27, which is 27, over 3 times 9, which is also 27, equals 3r. 27 divided by 27 is 1, so 1 equals 3r. Again, we want to solve for r, so let's divide both sides by 3 now. In doing so, this crosses out. You can see that r is 1/3. So this answer is going to be B, 1/3. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if negative 4x times x plus 6 equals negative 44, then x equals. So we're going to be solving this equation for x. So to start, I'm going to multiply this negative 4 here and here. That is, I'm going to distribute it. This becomes negative 4x minus 24 equals negative 44. Again, we're solving for x, so we want to get x equal to something by itself. So let's go ahead and add 24 to both sides. Says negative 4x equals negative 44 plus 24 is going to be negative 20. All right, let's divide both sides by negative 4 now to get x by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with x. Negative divided by negative is going to be a positive. Negative 20 divided by negative 4 is going to be positive 5. So this one is going to be C, positive 5. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if negative 4 over 10 times 10 over 4 equals 8p, then p equals. So we're going to be solving this equation for p. You should be able to say that negative 4 over 10 times 10 over 4 is going to reduce to negative 1. But if you couldn't see that, let's go ahead and just multiply these two fractions together. Negative 4 times 10 is going to be negative 40. 10 times 4 is 40 equals 8p. Negative 40 divided by 40 is going to be negative 1 equals 8p. Divide both sides by 8 now, and we get p equals negative 1/8, which is answer choice B in this case. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x over 6 plus 9 equals negative 11, then x equals. So for this one, we're going to be solving the equation for x, which means we're going to get x equal to something by itself. Let's start by subtracting 9 from each side. This crosses out, leaving us with x over 6 equals negative 11 minus 9 is going to be negative 20. To clear this 6 from the denominator of x, we're going to multiply both sides by 6. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with x equals negative 20 times 6. A negative times a positive is going to be a negative. This is going to be negative 120, which is answer choice D, of course. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x equals 3, solve for y. So wherever we see x in this original equation, we're going to plug in 3 accordingly. I like to do so in parentheses so there's no confusion. Let's go ahead and get this done. This is minus 3 to the 4th. Let's go ahead and work this out. 3 squared is 9. 4 times 3 is 12. Let's do 3 to the 4th off to the side. That's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. That's going to be 9, 27. 27 times 3, if you can't do it mentally, you could always do it off to the side very quickly, is 1 to 81. So this is minus 81. This is 21 minus 81, which is going to be negative 60. So the answer to this one is B, negative 60. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says solve for x, so we're going to be solving the following equation for x. Let me quickly say this. These types of problems appear very frequently on both the ASVAB and PiCAT, so make sure you can solve equations. That said, for this one, we're going to start by taking this 2 and distributing it here and here. 2 times 5x is 10x. 2 times 1 is 2, so this is 10x plus 2 equals 11x. Let's get all the x's to one side of the equal sign. So let's subtract 10x from both sides. In doing so, this leaves us with 2 over here. 11x minus 10x is just x. So x in this case equals 2, which is answer choice A. If you need more help with solving equations, I have plenty of videos in regard to that topic on my channel already. For this ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, it says, what is the solution to the following equation? Right away, we should see that we have a quadratic with a leading coefficient of 1 in our numerator, and that should prompt you to think about factoring the numerator to get started. Let's try to do that. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 30 but add to positive 1. That's going to be minus 5 and plus 6. This enables us to cross this out, and in doing so, this becomes x plus 6 equals 11. Subtract 6 from both sides, and this becomes x equals 5. Now let's plug in 5 to these x values to make sure that this makes a true statement. This becomes 25 plus 5 minus 30 over 5 minus 5 equals 11. If you do the math here, this becomes 0 over 0 equals 11, which is not a true mathematical statement. Therefore, there is no solution to this one. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says solve for x. We have 1/2 x minus 1/4 equals 5/6x. First thing I want to do is multiply all these by 12 so I can clear these fractions. And I'm doing that because 2, 4, and 6 all go into 12 evenly. And I'm not going to skip this step so you can see the logic behind this. 12 times 1/2 becomes 12 over 2x. 12 divided by 2 is 6, so that reduces to 6x. 12 times 1/4 becomes 12 over 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 5 times 12 is 60, so this is 60 over 6x. 60 divided by 6 is 10. All right, so now we have a very simple equation to solve. Subtract 6x from both sides. This leaves you with negative 3 over here. 10x minus 6x is 4x. Divide both sides by 4 now. Cross this out. This leaves you with x equals negative 3/4, which is answer choice D, of course. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 70 divided by y equals 5z, what is the value of zy? So instead of solving for x or y, we're trying to solve for zy. That is two variables. So to get started, let's go ahead and just copy this one down, and we're going to play with it a little bit to see if we can figure this one out without having to do too much work. I don't like having variables in a denominator, so I'm going to clear that by multiplying both sides by y. This leaves us with 70 equals 5zy. Now it should be pretty obvious that to get zy by itself, all we have to do is divide both sides by 5. In doing so, this leaves us with zy. 70 divided by 5 is going to be 14. If you couldn't do that mentally, you could do the long division like so. This is 1, 20. When you drop down that 0, this is going to be 4 with no remainder. And of course, if you want to, you could rewrite this zy equals 14. We were trying to solve for zy. We know that is C14. For this ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question, we're trying to solve the equation 2x over 4 plus x over 6 equals 2 for x. Of course, you could plug in your answer choices and see which of those makes a true mathematical statement. The algebraic way to solve this one, of course, is to first rewrite these with a common denominator of 12. To make 4 12, we have to multiply it by 3. And we're also going to do that to its numerator, so this is going to become 6x over 12. To write 6 as 12, we have to multiply it by 2. We also have to do that to its numerator. This becomes 8x over 12 equals 2. Let's clear 12 from the denominator by multiplying it by both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with 8x over here. 2 times 12 is 24. Divide both sides by 8 now. This crosses out, leaving you with x equals 24 divided by 8, which is 3. So the correct answer to this one is C3. For this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're trying to solve the equation 3p minus 5 plus 2p equals 25 minus 5p for p. So let's start by combining 3p and 2p to make that 5p minus 5 equals 25 minus 5p. Now we're going to get all the p's to one side of the equal sign and everything else to the other side. I'm going to add 5p to both sides right here. In doing so, this crosses out and this becomes 10p. And at the same time, I'm going to add this 5 over here via addition. This crosses out, leaving me with the equal sign over here. 25 plus 5 is 30. Divide both sides by 10 now to get p by itself. This becomes p equals 30 divided by 10, which you should know is 3. So the correct answer to this one is B, p equals 3. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT, we're going to be solving for x. The first thing we have to do is distribute this 3, distribute this -2, and distribute this 5 accordingly. This becomes 3x plus 3 minus 6x plus 2, again, a negative times a negative is a positive, equals 5x minus 10 plus 7. All right, let's combine like terms and solve. 3x and -6x is going to be -3x. 3 and 2 is going to be 5. 5x doesn't have a like term. 10 and -7 becomes -3. Let's move this over here via addition. This crosses out. This becomes 8x. Let's move this one over here via addition. This crosses out. This becomes 8. Divide both sides by 8 to get x by itself. This becomes 1. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So the correct answer is C, 1. This ASVAB PiCAT math knowledge practice test question says this: if 3 times x plus 6 in parentheses equals 39, then x equals. So in other words, we're going to be solving this equation here. We have 3x plus 6 equaling 39, of course. Let's get rid of this 3 by dividing both sides of the equation by 3. This crosses out, leaving you with x plus 6 over here. This mental math is actually very easy to do. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So to get x by itself, all we have to do is subtract 6 from both sides now. This becomes x equals 13 minus 6 is 7. Correct answer is A7. Let's go ahead and check it very quickly by plugging in 7 for x right here. This becomes 3 times 13, which is in fact 39. So we know we did it correctly. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if 4x squared equals 16, then x equals. Let me say this, there are 3 ways you can solve this one. You could recognize that you have the difference of 2 perfect squares here and solve this one via factoring. You could also take your answer choices, plug them in, and find which pair works. And finally, you can solve this one algebraically. Of course, let's go ahead and do that. We have 4x squared equals 16. Again, we're solving for x, so we want to get x by itself. So let's divide both sides by 4. This crosses out, leaving you with x squared on this side. 16 divided by 4 is 4. To get rid of this square, we're going to take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with x on this side. The square root of 4 is going to be plus or minus 2. As it happens, this actually has two solutions, notably negative 2 or positive 2. If you plug both those in for x, you'll see that they both work. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 4 over 3 times 3 over 4 equals 5z, then z equals. Let's start by copying this one down. Again, on the ASVAB and PiCAT, you will have your own scratch paper and you'll want to use it. So we're going to be solving for z, of course. Let's take care of this multiplication real quick to make this one a little bit easier to see. As you can see, we're multiplying two fractions, which means you're just going to multiply straight across. In other words, this is going to become 4 times 3 over 3 times 4 equals 5z. This becomes 12 over 12 equals 5z. 12 divided by 12 is 1 equals 5z. Divide both sides by 5 to get z by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with just z on this side. As you can see, z equals 1/5, which is answer choice C. Nothing too difficult there. That said, you had to be able to work with fractions. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if x over 5 plus 6 equals negative 14, then x equals. Let's start by copying this one down. Again, on the ASVAB and PiCAT, you will have your own scratch paper, so I encourage you to use it. Again, we're solving for x, so ultimately we want to get x equal to something by itself. Let's subtract 6 from both sides. In doing so, we get to cross this out. This leaves us with x over 5 on this side. Negative 14 minus 6 is negative 20. And then finally, let's get x by itself by removing this 5 from the denominator. To do that, we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 5. In doing so, that crosses out there, leaving you with just x. Negative 20 times 5 is going to be negative 100. So the answer to this one is C, negative 100. Again, for the ASVAB, you have to be able to work with positives and negatives. Negative times a positive is a negative. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if x squared minus 44 equals 100, then x equals. Let's start by copying this one down. Again, on test day, you will have your own scratch paper. We're solving for x, so ultimately we want to get x equal to something by itself. Let's go ahead and add 44 to both sides of this equation. This crosses out here, leaving us with x squared over here. 100 plus 44 is 144. Let's get x by itself by taking the square root of both sides. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving us with x. When you take the square root of a positive number, the answer is always going to be plus or minus. Square root of 144, you should know, is 12. That said, that plus or minus isn't one of our answer choices. So you have to know we could write this like this: x equals 12 or x equals negative 12. Since we only have positive 12 as an answer choice, we're going to go with C, positive 12. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 4x squared equals 16, then x equals. So this is 4x squared equals 16. Let's start by dividing both sides by 4 to get x squared by itself. In doing so, this crosses out, leaving you with x squared equals 16 divided by 4 is 4. To get rid of this square, we're going to do the opposite operation. Notably, we're going to take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with this, x equals. When you take the square root of a positive number, the answer is always plus or minus, and the square root of 4 is 2. So your answer could look like this: x equals plus or minus 2, x equals 2, or x equals negative 2. If you plug in positive 2 or negative 2 here, it will work. So we're going to go with answer choice B, x equals plus or minus 2. Solve this math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT. It says if 4 times x plus 6 in parentheses equals 44, then x equals. Let me start by saying this. I know many of you, like me, can solve this one mentally. That's great. That said, on test day, things happen. You might be a little nervous and your mental math may not be as good as it is when you're sitting in your own house. So for that reason, let's work this one out off to the side. It says 4x plus 6 equals 44. Let's get rid of this 4 via division of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with x plus 6 over here. 44 divided by 4 is 11. Subtract 6 from both sides. Now this crosses out. X equals 11 minus 6, which is 5. The answer, of course, is 5. Let's check it real quick. Uh, 5 plus 6 is 11. 11 times 4 is 44. So we know we did it correctly. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if x squared plus x squared equals 8, then x equals. In other words, we're going to be solving this equation for x. That is to say, we're going to get x equal to something by itself. X squared and x squared are like terms. That means we can combine them. And if you need help seeing that, we can put a 1 in front of these x squareds. 1x squared plus 1x squared is 2x squared. Of course, this equals 8. Let's go ahead and divide both sides by 2 now to get x squared by itself. This crosses out, leaving you with x squared over here. 8 divided by 2 is 4. To get rid of this square, we're going to do the square root of both sides like so. This crosses out, leaving you with x over here. The square root of 4 is plus or minus 2, but since we only have plus 2 as an answer choice, we're going to go with b, positive 2. For this ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question, we're going to be solving this equation for x. That said, we're going to clear 4nx from our denominator by multiplying each of these terms by 4x. This becomes 4x squared over 4 plus 32x over x equals 12x. These 4's cross out, these x's cross out, leaving you with x squared plus 32 equals 12x. We can set this equation equal to 0 by subtracting 12x from both sides. This becomes x squared minus 12x plus 32 equals 0. Now we can solve this by factoring. Our two terms are going to be -4 and -8. And now we could set each of these equal to 0 independently and get our solution here. This says x equals 4, x equals 8, which is answer choice A. And if you plug those in, they both work. Math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says if x plus 5 cents equals 83 cents, then x equals. So for this one, we're solving an equation, albeit with decimals. I'm going to go ahead and write it down like this. And you don't have to include that 0 in front of the decimal if you don't want to. As we would when we solve equations, we're just going to get x equal to something by itself. So in other words, we're going to subtract 5 cents from both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with just x on this side. And we can see x is equal to 83 cents minus 5 cents. If you can't do this mentally, do it off to the side like I am. 3 minus 5 we can't do, so we have to borrow from this 8. This becomes a 7. This becomes 13. 13 minus 5 is going to be 8, of course. 7 minus 0 is just 7. So x in this case is 78 cents, which is answer choice B. Again, the ASVAB is a computer adaptive test, so in the beginning of the test, you will see questions that are as simple as this one. This math knowledge practice test question for the ASVAB and PiCAT says solve the following equation for D. It says B equals CD. Well, this is a literal equation, and our goal here is to get D equal to something by itself, as you can kind of see from our answer choices. This says C times D. To get rid of C, we're going to do the opposite operation of multiplication. That is, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by C. In doing so, this crosses out. It says D equals B over C. And then if you want to write it like an answer choice, you just do this. D equals B over C, which we can see is answer choice C in this case. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 3ab equals 6, what is the value of a in terms of b? So we're given 3ab, and we're told that equals 6. So we want to solve this one for a in terms of b. In other words, we're going to get a equal to something by itself. To do that, we're going to divide both sides by 3b. In doing so, this 3 crosses out here, and this b crosses out here, leaving us with just a on this side. All right, let's reduce this since we don't see it as an answer choice. What is 6 divided by 3? That's going to become 2 over b. So the answer to this one is a in terms of b is a equals 2 over b, which is answer choice A. This ASVAB PiCAT Math Knowledge Practice Test question says if 3x squared equals 27, then x equals. So in other words, we're going to be solving this equation for x. That is to say we're going to get x equal to something by itself. Let's get started by dividing both sides of this equation by 3. In doing so, that crosses out, leaving you with x squared equals 27 divided by 3 is 9. To get rid of this square, we're going to do the opposite operation. That is to say, we're going to take the square root of both sides of this equation. These cancel out, leaving you with just x over here. So technically, this answer is plus or minus. What is the square root of 9? It's going to be 3. That said, we only have positive 3 as an answer choice, so we're just going to go with positive 3. So that is that one.